I've been wanting to say this for a couple of episodes now. When we last met our heroines, they were talking about stories that they are carrying about themselves, stories that are hurting them, story about other people and what those other people mean when they do the things that they do. And we've been talking about asking ourselves, is that really true? Is that really what's happening? What are the facts? And am I making the facts fit a mold that has more to do with me than it has to do with what might actually be going on? So today we're going to continue that conversation because I think it's really important for us to talk about how we create stories about other people, because it not only impacts how we work together, but it influences how we lead, how much trust we bring into a relationship, and whether we feel like we belong and whether there's connection.
Hi, I'm Annette Garsteck, and Sandra, I'm totally in on this conversation.
I love this. And I'm Sandra. Before we dive in, let's take a moment and tell people or remind people or maybe ask people to hit follow or subscribe, as that's the easiest way to keep up with our conversations, which I know everybody is sitting on the edge of their seat, just waiting for our next conversation to hit the
They are.
airwaves.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are.
Okay. So today, today I want to talk about something that is maybe new to some people and different, or maybe some people already know about it, but I want to think about it in a different way.
Let's do it.
All right. So, when something happens, we have a tendency to think of it as it's a problem that needs to be fixed.
Correct.
Does that feel right to you?
As the oldest child, as a little type A kind of personality, yes, everything is a problem that needs to be fixed.
I can't believe that at all.
Now you're just fibbing.
Well, and I am also a firstborn. I'm not at all type A.
No.
Are you laughing?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, if I do something that's not on my to-do list, I write it on my to-do list so I can check it off.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done that.
Exactly. You know, exactly.
And maybe this is also, I know we're attributing this to being our oldest child status, but this is a lot of what we see when working with high performing women, right? Maybe how they got there is different than how we got there, but I still see the same behaviors: high achieving, wanting to get it done, wanting to do it well, believing that their work product is a reflection of them and who they are, finding meaning in doing things well. So these are not unusual characteristics of the women that we get the pleasure of working with.
Absolutely. They're my favorite people.
They are my favorite people for sure. So how can we separate that?
So one of the issues that happens when we think something is happening and it's a problem and it needs to be fixed,
Yeah,
right? What happens when we do that is that we start thinking about ways in which we can solve the problem.
correct.
And then we pick the best one and we apply that one. And when it doesn't work, what happens?
We go back in for another try. We take a different approach. We iterate it.
Right. But we're still viewing it as a problem.
Correct.
Okay. And the way we understand processes is different, right? A process doesn't have a clear beginning. It doesn't have a clear end. It is something that is ongoing, correct?
Yes, repeatable. Evergreen.
Yeah. When a process isn't working, how do we approach that?
If a process isn't working, then I personally would say, is there something else influencing it? Is there maybe something that isn't factored into the process? Or I'm looking at the timing of the steps. I'm still looking for quote unquote a fix, but I would say that it's less sensitive or less urgency.
And less blame finding, correct?
Yeah, problems do tend to have a blaming aspect, like
Yeah.
who's to blame? How did we get here?
Which may be useful and helpful information to understand how did we get here, but not from the perspective of finding blame, from the perspective of is there another process that maybe needs to be improved as well? So, the reason I bring this up is there is this piece of work that I learned while I was doing my Gestalt certification that has made a significant impact on me, and I think it is one of the more useful ways that we can look at stories and story making and meaning making. The tool that I learned about was polarities, right? And so in when we look at polarities, we look at opposites, right? On the one side there's this and on the other side there's that. And what we're
Okay.
trying to do is we're trying to find the best way to resolve that polarity. And what ends up happening is when we are looking at it from the perspective of problem, we are looking at it as an either or. Either I can do this end over here, or I can do this other end over here. But a process says, how do I do both? So let me give you an example.
Please do.
Okay, this is my favorite example.
Okay. Ooh, I'm
Okay,
excited.
take an in breath, and I don't want you to exhale until I tell you to. But when you start feeling like I have to exhale, clap or do something, keep inhaling, hold your breath, hold your breath, hold your breath. Yeah, 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 yeah. So here's the problem, right? At some point, you needed to actually exhale. Well, that's what happens if you treat that end as a problem. Well, the best way to fix this problem is to take an exhale. Great. So let's do that, Annette. Let's exhale. Okay? And do not inhale until I tell you to inhale, right? And you can only do that exhale for so long
Right.
before you look at it and say, this is a problem. And the best way to fix this problem is to take an inhale. Great. Well, if we're only ever looking at breathing as a problem to be fixed, then when we are inhaling, we will fix the problem by exhaling. And when we are exhaling, we will fix the problem by inhaling. But we are not maximizing our inhaling and our exhaling. We're doing it when we get to the very end of this is a problem I can't cope with anymore. It's an either or. But breathing is not an either or situation. It's a process. It's not a problem to be fixed. Back to your comment about how do I look at a process differently than a problem? One of the things you said, what's going on, right? Well, if I'm running, do we think I might be solving either end of that problem a little bit faster than if I'm standing still or sleeping in bed?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So, one of the challenges that comes up when we look at a story and we say, this is a problem that needs to be fixed, is we don't consider that we're actually working inside of a system, and that system is part of a process, and that process needs to be maximized. When we look at a system as a problem to be fixed, we are never maximizing the benefit to everybody. We are only dealing with one end of the pole, and we're dealing with it when it gets to absolute bazonker stage, and then we just can't
Mhm.
cope with it anymore, right? So my boss drives me crazy. Great. That's a process to manage because it's a relationship. It's not a problem to be managed. It's a process. What does that relationship need from a processing perspective? There are times when your boss needs you to do certain things, right? Because the timing is such that there's
Yeah.
reporting, there's cycles, there's business cycles, there's performance reviews, there's all kinds of things that are due. And so they are experiencing some pressures on their end, and they're trying to solve those system issues. And there are other times, right, when we get to the point where there's more flexibility for us to address the individual person in the process. Like you were talking about in our last episode, when somebody's experiencing a situation that requires them to have special accommodations. So it can't be an either or, it has to be an and. So when we look at stories from the perspective of this is a problem, this is the meaning I'm attaching to it, we're usually looking at it from an either or perspective as opposed to and.
Or as a whole continuum of a process. That is a great way to think about it. And we're still going to have to solve problems, right? There's things that arise that need a momentary judgment decision, and we're going to have to do that. But overall, I agree with you. Relationships, work performance,
Careers.
driving, careers, right? Those are things that are processes. They are evolving processes, but they are processes nonetheless. So we don't have to be so either or this or that. We can say this and a little bit of that and some of those, and we can bring in all these things.
And of course, the minute you said all that, I was thinking of going to that yogurt, frozen yogurt place. What was that called? Do you know the one I'm talking about? Began with an M and you put all those goodies on top and then paid a small fortune by weight. Menchie's, Menchie's.
Menchie's, interesting.
Oh, I'll have a little
Yeah.
bit of this scoop and I'll have a little bit of that and I'll have a little bit more of this. Yes. I think we tend to look at things as black and white, and they are never black and white. There's a lot of gray area in between.
I need to come back to pausing and stopping myself from the rage and going all the way over to like this will never happen again. Not that I'm not like that all the time anyways, but anyways, how do I stop myself from seeing it as a problem and allow myself to consider the possibility that this is actually a process issue? What kind of tools and resources do you have for that?
So one of the things that we can do is make a grid
Okay.
where we can talk about one side of the problem and the other side of the problem. So if it were a problem between, say, my boss and me, I would put me on one side, I would put my boss on the other side. So this is a vertical stripe down the paper. And then I would put a horizontal stripe down the paper, and I'd say, what are the positives of focusing on me and the way that I see this? What are the negatives of focusing on me and how I see this? What are the positives of seeing this from my boss's perspective? What are the negatives of seeing this from my boss's perspective? And when we are treating something as a process, what we want to do is maximize the positives for both of us. Because if we're only focused on one, then we're going to realize the negatives of both, because I'm going to dig my heels in and I'm going to focus on me, right? And I'm going to start to experience all those negatives. I'm not going to get promoted. I'm not going to get what I want. I'm not going to get the raise that I want. I'm not going to be viewed as a team player. And my boss is going to experience it from his negatives as well, her negatives as well, because they're going to be like, I'm going to have to performance manage this person. I'm going to have to document everything. I'm going to have to, follow up and follow up and follow up. And I'm going to have to make sure. I mean, there's all these negatives that come from looking at this as a problem to be fixed, as opposed to saying, what are the benefits and how do I stay this? Well, how do I give a little? How do I give a little here? Which is exactly what you were talking about in the last episode about asking the questions around what do I need? But we can't be so focused only on our own that we don't make room for the other.
Agreed. And once we've gone through this grid and we've formulated an initial process improvement, we'll call it, how do we engage with somebody else to finish refreshing the process so it works for everybody?
Well, I'm going to ask you, how would you, if you were coaching one of your career clients, what would you ask them, or what would you suggest that they do?
I'd suggest that they set up a meeting with their colleague, their boss, their direct report, and say, I have noticed this behavior, very a la Bika that you were talking about in episode 45. So this is the behavior that's come up. This is the impact it has on you, me, the team, the customer, wherever the impacts are lying. If we allow this to continue, here's the consequences of that. And then here's an alternate path that we can take. I am not married to this alternate path of behaviors. I need your input. So tell me, have you noticed this behavior? What impact does this broken process have on you? So I'd get them to look at the same evaluative steps and make a recommendation or two or three. Sometimes we don't address the problem because we don't notice it's a problem for some other people.
Absolutely.
And then, Sandra, my first corporate career was really managing customer service people, and customer service people don't have the time to continue telling you how many problems they encounter,
Yeah.
right? They're busy handling customers' issues. So they'll report the problem once, maybe they'll report it the second time, and then they start creating workarounds, solutions to get their job done quickly to meet the client's needs. And they'll stop telling you that it's wrong, even though it might continue to be wrong for months and years. Some of this process improvement is elevating it to the people that need to see it and then continuing to report when it's still broken. Many times I find that we just need to keep the conversation going. And usually when I had a client or a direct report that had this ongoing issue, they had just stopped elevating it to me because they thought I remembered that it was going on, or maybe another stakeholder knew about it and they just didn't communicate it to multiple people.
Yeah.
So that's really an important piece of this conversation.
I love that. And I love it for 2 reasons. 1, you got curious. You
Mhm.
invited curiosity. How do you see it from your perspective? Right? And back to what we said in episode 45, right? The minute we've decided that somebody is doing something for a specific reason, we've stopped the ability to bring curiosity into the situation. Curiosity requires that we suspend the story long
Mhm.
enough for us to ask the question. So
Yeah.
I love that you said, I would counsel my client or invite my client to take it back to the people who are impacted and have a conversation with them. Invite the curiosity.
And that's the barrier. The barrier is saying, I can't do something about this myself because I'm not the only, and let's use business language, right? I'm not the only stakeholder. I'm
Yes.
not the only owner of this problem. It's a partnership, a collaboration. You can't solve something alone that doesn't alone belong to you. If you're having trouble with a system, a larger system, a larger process, you need the input of others. So stop the heroism of, I noticed it, I'm going to fix it myself. Because you could be fixing the wrong problem. You could be addressing it with a solution that only works for you. So
Yes.
you do have to invite other people into it.
Yes. Yes, and what you just hit on there is another problem when we only look at situations with a problem and solution lens. And that is all the people who are arguing that we need to exhale because we're like about to explode, right? They finally convince people that, oh, we should exhale. So we exhale. And then what happens, right? We
We have
get
to
to the
reconvince them to inhale.
to inhale. And so all the people who were fighting the exhale, right, say, well, see, we told you this wasn't going to solve the problem. Now we have to go back to inhaling. And so we're doing, and we see this in business so much, right? We swing from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum rather than saying, how do we do both elegantly?
Yeah, yeah. How do we have a robust process, a robust system that allows us to handle these different little challenges, right? These things shouldn't stop the business. They shouldn't stop the relationships from progressing forward. They should let us know when the system, the process needs a little tweak.
Yeah. And so, the whole point of this conversation is stories we
Mhm.
make up about other people, right? And so, why am I so focused on this process view of looking at people and the stories that we carry through this process lens? And part of it is because we live inside roles, we live inside systems. We live inside of frameworks that are built to support a process. And so, is the person behaving the way they're behaving because their role to do that, right? I mean,
Mm.
I for many years I spent my life as a IT project manager implementing projects into support organizations, right? So, what is the support organization going to do? They're going to push back. It's their job to push back. Where are my process documents for this? What's going to happen when this situation? Where's my escalation path? What's my emergency process to recover this system when things go down? Have I gotten enough training on this? I could look at my business partner, the support organization, and say, oh my God, they're just problems. They're just troublemaker. We're trying to get this project done and they're screwing with my timeline.
That's one way to look at it,
It
but
is. It's not a productive
you're
way to look at it.
no, you're looking at it as a problem, right? And what I'd like to add to your definition of a problem is that problems should be one-offs. They're things that arise, and after they're fixed, it should resolve through my customer service lens, right? A problem is this coupon code isn't working for online
Right.
ordering. I should be able to get it fixed, and then the problem resolves. Maybe there's some fallout, like I need to call 3 customers back where it wasn't working, right? But there's some manual workarounds. The coupon code isn't working. Here's an alternate code, Sandra. It's still 30% off. Have a great day. Thank you. Did it work for you? Reporting it, moving on, right? So that's a problem. But a process, a bigger overall systemic issue could be every time you generate a 30% off coupon, it doesn't work. What's wrong with that? That's a bigger conversation. And we have to invite people in to say,
Yeah. And
why is
the
that
challenge, right. And the challenge is often instead of looking at it as a process problem, we look at it as a person problem.
yes. And we tell a story
And
that
we tell a
Sandra
story.
cannot generate that 30% off coupon to save her soul correctly.
Right. That group is so irresponsible. That group is so incompetent. The manager of that group can't hold people accountable.
And think about that story and how it's preventing you from really coming up with something that's amazing at work. Think about that, how it's limiting the people and their resources that you have. And let's decide to do something different.
And it also, I think, colors conflict,
Oh, for sure.
right? I had an experience in my work life where I walked into a group that had a very adversarial relationship with a different group. And my experience walking in was, we should be able to get through this. And within a year, I was one of the inmates.
I'm sorry.
No, I think that's what happens, right? And of course, it's a growth process. I might approach that situation completely differently today, right?
Sure. Right.
But it's so interesting that at some level, right, this problem to fix and the stories we create about something become culture, and we can't fight culture, not as individuals.
But that's why this is the way we've always done it, is one of the most damaging attitudes in business, really in life, because it doesn't invite the conversation on, can we make this better? Can we tell a different story? Can this be the starting point and not the ending point?
So this is why in episode 44, we talked about oftentimes we carry these stories about ourselves and we make them about ourselves, right? I'm not good. What's wrong with me, right? But what if I'm working in a system that doesn't support the way I work? We're not going to change culture. We
No.
can try. We can engage with faith and trust and a sense of belonging and a sense of desire. But at some point, if we've tried and we're not making progress, we have to ask ourselves, we should ask ourselves, what if
Yes, you
I'm
should.
not the problem in this? What if I'm working inside of a system that's asking me to work in a way that is not healthy, requires a shift in the way that I work, that is not supportable? I mean, you said it beautifully. In episode 45, you were talking about what's the cost to me.
And those are the times when you have to evaluate that is the system, is the process, is the place so wrong for me that I have to walk away. And also, you have to not tell yourself the story that you were the failure.
Or that the other people involved were the failure because they're
Correct.
working inside of a system. And, right,
That
maybe the
works for
system is,
them.
yeah, or maybe they're willing to make the
The
adjustment.
concessions. Yeah.
Right. that's not my decision to make for them.
No,
It
no,
might
it
be
certainly isn't.
costing them family members, it might be costing them years, it might be costing them a heart attack.
Mm,
That is not my decision to make for them. The only person I can control in all of this is myself. I mean, how
yeah,
many times, maybe I'm just outing myself, but how many times have we been in a situation and we say, I'm going to quit? And everybody else is going to quit behind me too, because they are just as PO'd as I am about this situation. And we quit. And 2 years later, everybody we thought was going to follow us out the door is still at that place.
mhm,
And then we
yeah.
make up a story about them. And the reality is, maybe they're willing to make that adjustment. And I wasn't willing to make that adjustment. And there's nothing wrong with either one.
You said something in episode 44, which is we have to work with the information that we have at the time
Yeah.
and make the decision. It might make us popular, it might make us unpopular, but know that if you do what's best for yourself in the moment, that you can always look back with a lesson, right? Or maybe that's a pivotal point where you made one small decision that led to other decisions. You have to have trust that it's an evolving situation. And even if you look back now and say, I would have done it different, but I'm so glad I did it that way,
You know,
that's okay.
that's that there was a meme on the internet years ago, and I've never been able to find it no matter how much I've looked for it. It's something about experience is the thing that tells you not to do X and Y because, you might die. But doing X and Y is what gave you the experience. So on the one hand, right? Oh, I know not to do that because I have experience. But it was doing the stupid thing first that caused me to realize, "Oh, I probably shouldn't do that again. I broke my leg." Yeah.
Right. But what if you've evolved and you've learned how to do X and Y and you won't break your leg? What if not doing something gave you the courage to say, I should have just done it? What if you're in a company or a culture where doing that thing would be so super valuable and they have the tolerance to let you try?
And you will never know until you do.
Yeah. So just because it's the right answer for you today doesn't mean it will be the right answer for you tomorrow. And you always have the opportunity to make a different choice.
And,
And let's not make a story up
yeah.
about the choice we made yesterday, the one we make tomorrow, or the one our neighbor made in the cube next to us.
I love this, and I wanna go back to how the story that I opened up episode 45 with, the Paris, the
Mhm.
reason all the reasons to not go, but we went anyway, right?
Yeah,
The people that we were in that moment is not the people we are today.
correct.
And so we have a story about somebody and we're acting from that story. But who we were in that story and who that person was in that story, not the person that's standing across from us now. Time didn't stand still. They've grown, they've evolved, hopefully. You've grown, you've evolved, hopefully. And how often are we willing to look at somebody with whom we have past experience with fresh eyes?
Yeah. This is an interesting conversation. And when I think about careers, one of the things I often get asked about is accepting a counter offer.
Mm.
Put in your notice, and they've made a counter offer. These are some of the questions that I ask my clients that are in this situation when they're considering it. What has changed? You were resigning 3 hours ago. Now they've come back with a counter offer, and now it's a different place. Is your boss changing? Is your title changing? Is your compensation changing? Is your team changing? Are the challenges gone? And most of the time, what the answers reveal is the title and the compensation are changing. Everything else has stayed the same. And if I can introduce you to two new elements on top of it, you've already resigned. So where do you think the company's trust of you is? And then two, the other thing that's been layered on top is now they need to replace you. So you've probably bought yourself extra compensation and title for a moment, a small moment in your career, but you haven't bought it long term. And you still are going to the same place to work. That's the reason I think, the multiple reasons I think accepting a counteroffer won't work. But many people are able to tell themselves a different story in the moment, accept it, and then a few months, a few weeks later, they're like, what the heck did I do to myself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the risk of introducing something completely new in the last like 3 minutes of our recording. I would just say, what's the fear? What's the fear underneath the jump? What's the fear that's holding you in place? What are you making this mean? Which has been our question throughout this whole conversation about the stories we hold about other people. What are
Yeah.
you making it mean?
Yes.
Because it's never about the other person. It is always about us.
Yes. And can we hide behind that story?
Mm.
Because I make up a story about somebody else, does it get me and my subconscious, my unconscious off the hook on exploring the story about myself?
Wow. We might have to add an episode to this conversation.
We might have to add to talk about that at some future point. I
Mm.
don't have the answer. It's
I don't
just
have it
what
either.
came up for me when you asked that question.
Often, when I ask the question, one of several things are going on. The first one is maybe resentment at being asked, embarrassment at being asked that question. Sometimes tears, right? Because there's real emotion behind that. And what I find most interesting, regardless of what the reaction is what is the story underneath? Because that is usually where we hit the kernel that's at work here. And by kernel, I don't mean COL. I mean KERNEL, the
Yeah.
kernel of self-doubt, the kernel of truth, the kernel of what's really happening underneath all of these stories is usually what is coming up when all those other reactions hit.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is it? It might be something we've never said out loud.
Yes, yes.
I
I
think
could
we all
talk all day, but we're at the end of our recording time. We
know we're
should
at the end of our time.
and we should probably let people go to the bathroom.
Oh, well, Sandra, it's a podcast. They could go to the bathroom anytime they want.
I guess so. Or maybe drive into the parking lot,
Maybe get out of the car.
do a
Maybe
cat
because they didn't bring their earbuds. Yeah. But that's okay. You could pause us and come back at any time.
not too long, though. Don't
Not
pause
too
for
long.
too long.
Oh my gosh, Sandra, such a good conversation. You got me thinking about so many other pieces of how it can work with women who are in a career transition mindset or a career growth mindset. And for your clients that are leading and discovering about themselves so many new things. I
Mm,
think it's a great time to invite them to join us even deeper for more conversation into our newsletter. Please head over to exposingthehiddenreality.com, sign up for the newsletter. Sandra and I have some plans. We talked about them yesterday. We're not going to release them quite yet because we just have ideas. They haven't been vetted. And once they are, you'll be the recipient of those new ideas. All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
see you next week.